going to begin with a roll call to identify ourselves. Mayor Mike Fournier is here. Commissioner Macy.
Here.
Commissioner Perush.
Here.
Commissioner Dubuck.
I'm here.
Commissioner Douglas.
Here.
Commissioner Gibbs.
Here.
Commissioner Lavasser.
Here.
And of course, we have Ms. Rudd, our Finance Director, Dave Gillum, our City Attorney, and now in his first official capacity here at a public meeting, we have our new City Manager, Paul Brake.
Woohoo!
Hey, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commission. Good to be here.
Good. So what we'll do is we'll start. Ms. Schwanger, did we get anybody call in for public comment this evening?
Mayor Fournier, we had no public comment.
Okay, no public comment, which we're rocking. So that brings us down to number 4 already in tonight's agenda, fiduciary funds. So I know we postponed this from last time. It was getting kind of late. So notwithstanding, I assume Ms. Rudd's going to handle this unless there's any other comments by Mr. Gillum or Mr. Brake. Okay, Ms. Rudd.
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. It's going to take a minute. If you have a budget document, it is page 326. Hopefully you can see that on the screen now. Are you seeing my shared screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only real comment I want to make on the retirement fund is that we are contributing the full ARC. That is, full ARC is $8,259,000. The budget actually has a little more, so we make sure that we hit it because it is required. And that is about a $515,000 increase over the 1920 ARC. And the link is there to the full actuarial report that was performed this year. Right there in blue, if anyone wants to see the entire report, it's on the city's website under the finance department. And if there's no questions on that trust, the other one I would like to speak to briefly is the retiree healthcare fund, which is on page 328. Similar comments for this fund as well. The contribution, recommended contribution for next year is $941,000 approximately, and that is budgeted in full and slightly over, again for the same reason. And that is about $80,000 lower than the 1920 budget. So in addition, I just want to mention, I mentioned this already when we covered the general fund, but the recommendation is to change the Medicare retiree drug subsidy that we receive in the amount of approximately $250,000 a year to this fund.
Questions for Ms. Rudd? Okay.
I guess we can go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the general fund forecast. Modified, let me just find that here. Got a lot of stuff open.
Yeah, I'm gonna, real quick before you start that, Ms. Rudd, I'm gonna ask the crew here that, you know, because Ms. Rudd is sharing her screen, I can't fully see all of your faces and acknowledgements if you want to ask a question. So I just ask if you can politely jump in, and if there's two at once, then I'll arbitrate. Okay, if you have a question or a comment, because I want to be able to see the updates on Ms. Rudd's screen as they are live. Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna have to change my document. Can you see the table that was emailed on the shared screen now? I just selected that. Sounds like a no.
No, I see it.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, so this was emailed out just recently, and this incorporates the state of Michigan's current state shared revenue estimates that they have posted online, in addition to cutting the statutory portion. There was a lot of back and forth, whether 50% or bring it down to zero. This has the 50% for 1920 and also 2021.
Ms. Rudd, you're showing the wrong thing now. You had the table up and now we're looking at this chart.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We're looking instead at the possible budget savings. We're not looking at the table right now. Like,
let me change it over to my other screen. Maybe that's the problem.
there you go.
There you go.
All right, I have two monitors here, so. Okay, so this was also emailed to you just recently. So if you also want to take a look at it in your email. You can see the difference in the ending fund balance here. In addition, what I want to mention is that originally, as well as here, the forecast assumed a 2% increase on state shared revenue for those projected years. And it continues to do that. It doesn't assume like a significant increase when the economy gets back to normal. It only has a 2% on the lower number in 2021.
Julie, this is projecting a $4 million use of the fund balance for this coming year, roughly.
4 million from the general fund, and then almost $1 million from public safety.
All right, so $5 million.
From if you're saying this year, from 2021, the budget we're talking about.
That's right, for 2021. It looks like it's a larger number for 21-22, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, that's why I pointed out. I'm going to turn my volume up right here, see if that works. That again, it only assumes a 2% increase in state shared revenue. It doesn't assume any sort of huge recovery from the position we're in right now. So that might look a little bit better.
Right.
In reality.
You'll forgive me. I know this was just sent out, maybe 45 minutes ago, and I haven't had a chance to truly digest it. What's being updated here? What is the change? What is the difference that's giving us these numbers?
The only change is the change in the state shared revenue.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't reflect any proposed cuts elsewhere. It's just what we anticipate being the difference in revenues coming in from the state of Michigan. Okay.
And Julie, on a going forward basis, does this anticipate no renewal of the public safety millage after it expires in future years?
A renewal.
Excuse me?
It does assume a renewal.
It does assume a renewal. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think this was requested at the last meeting. And then next, I think we have the list of possible budget savings that was requested from the various departments. Mr. Gillum sent out the responses by department head, and I have it here by fund.
Yeah,
You see
Mr.
that?
Mayor, I'm just going to jump in for a second. Yeah, after the commission had general discussion about losses in state shared revenue and some other issues, the commission had asked us to go back to the department heads and ask them to more or less sharpen their pencils to take a look at their budgets for the proposed budgets for 2021 and see if there were any of the items or expenditures that could be postponed or put off for a year. And we did that, and then received responses from many of the department heads. I sent you generally a list of the proposed reductions that they had sent to me. And then, as I think Julie was just starting to indicate, she took the next step and went ahead and put a specific dollar figure to those proposed reductions by the fund. So general fund, motor pool, whatever the specific fund was, she took the information I had got and put it in a format that would be more suited for your discussion tonight.
Julie, if I'm understanding this correctly, and I see reductions for the general and public safety fund of roughly 1.3 million. That's combined? That's general fund and public safety together?
Correct.
All right. So assuming that we adopted these changes, that would reduce our fund usage from roughly 5 million to roughly 3.7 million.
Isn't it 4 to 2.7?
Well, the overall amount between the public safety fund and the general fund is, approximately 5 million. You have about 439 and change in the general, and about $1 million, just under $1 million in the public safety. So together, that's 5. This would be the general fund right here, because we spend everything in the public safety fund, and then we bring money over from the general fund based on how those arrangements are made. So what I see here, these are the things that, at least right here at the general fund, just to re-ask the question, sorry, Commissioner Lavasser, we would see on the chart that you presented just previously, if we implemented these activities here, it would go down, that 3.9 would go down by 1.3 million because the expenditure tab would go down, correct?
Right.
We'd have roughly 40.3 million in expenditures. Commissioner Lavasser, I see your lips moving. I assume you're saying something or you're yelling at your cat, but I think you're on mute.
Sorry, that's, I thought I'd spare you on, have myself on mute the entire meeting. No, just so I want to make sure I understand here. So right now we're at 3.9 million fund usage for the general fund, not including the public safety. And these proposed cuts would take that number down by 1.3 million. So we'd have a $2.6 million fund usage in general, but we would then have another $1 million of fund usage in public safety. Am I understanding that correctly?
It really doesn't matter how we decide on what we sweep over to the public safety fund. We could send over less and then use more of the fund balance. So I kind of look at it in combination. So, but.
What I'm trying to get to at the end of the day, the amount of funds that we're able to invest in, I presume, short-term investments, how much is that going down during the course of the year if we adopt these things? Is it 2.6? Is it 3.6? Or am I missing it all together?
No, it goes from 5 million to 3.7. I look at it in combination. So.
All right. So we still have a $3.7 million fund usage even with these cuts.
Correct.
Ms. Rudd, just on the other page you had with all the potential, and I appreciate how you organized it. I think it makes a lot more sense. The ones though that say for like local streets and major streets, I mean, just to make sure everybody is aware, those can only be spent on roads, right? So we could, I mean, if we ran into a point where we were running out of money or funding for whatever reason, I mean, we're not, like when I look at the Major Streets Fund, we talked about Main Street. I mean, we want to use that money on, I mean, we can't use it anywhere else, but if that fund does come in trouble, we could, you know, not, I just don't want to, I don't want people to think that, oh, well, now we have $750,000 to spend on something else. Like that has to be spent on major streets. The same with the local streets amount. Am I mistaken in that presumption?
The only mobility there is between those two funds is between those two funds. So the Act 51 money, I can move 25% over to local streets. Currently, 100% of the millage is going over to the local streets. So if we were to get in, you know, have a lot of savings or a large fund balance in local streets, we could move some of that money over to major, but not outside those two funds.
Right. So we're talking road money, whether it's major or local, that's going towards our streets that you can't just move it and put it in public safety, for example. That's not a possibility.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question, Mike.
Yes, Commissioner Prush, go ahead.
Julie, if we were to make the cuts that are listed here for motor pool and IT, would that impact the fund balance issue at all? Or is that so segregated that even if we were to do that, it wouldn't impact the fund balance issue?
The general fund?
Right.
Fund balance? Yeah, right here, I don't know if you can see the little cursor. The IT savings, if we cut that $255,000 out of IT, that trickles down to about $68,000 to the general fund. That's assigned to the general fund.
Okay.
So that's part of the $1.3 million savings, assuming we do cut the IT budget. And then the $410,000 for the motor pool, if we suspend that third year of the catch-up plan, that would result in significant savings. Most of that savings is the general fund. I think the total savings might be around $440,000. 410 is allocated to the general fund, mostly because of the public safety recoupment that we have. It's quite significant.
Okay. So
does that answer your question?
Yes. So if we were to adopt, or if we were to essentially say, okay, we're going to defer that motor pool staged next year, we would save an additional 410 or 440,000.
Sorry, you cut out just a little bit there.
If in terms of the motor pool, we did what you said in terms of deferring for a year in terms of from the existing plan,
the catch up.
We could save 440,000 or 410,000, one of those two numbers.
Yeah, 410 with the general fund, but I think what we would do, we would suspend it equally so we don't get, so it doesn't get too complicated, because I think it'll start to get complicated on which funds we suspended it before. And we might have some disproportionate contributions to the fund. But some of these, I think we had an SUV replacement that we were going to forego. That money would just remain in the fund balance of the motor pool. because that's a replacement SUV. So we wouldn't see any direct savings if we cut out the fire SUV in the motor pool. That money would just stay in the motor pool for when perhaps they replace it next year. It would not go back to the general fund.
Okay,
Because we collected that over the years through depreciation.
okay. Thanks.
Julie, this document that we're looking at right now, is it posted somewhere? So if people are watching this on television?
No, it was just completed and emailed to the commissioners just prior to the meeting.
Okay, if people want to see it later on, where might they find it later on?
I received it as an email this evening about 6:15. Julie emailed it out. So that's where it is currently.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just know that people are going to want to see it, and I want them to hear where they can go find it.
Oh,
I know it's-
okay.
Commissioner, so they can see it right now, and they can always watch the video on this too. But, you know.
Is this visible from I know we can see it right now. Is it visible through the broadcast?
Yes, since it's on my shared screen. If we were just looking at it on our individual emails, no, but since it's on my shared screen, that should be live streaming right now.
Okay, and I appreciate it, and people can see it somewhat, but I would just like to make sure that we do get it posted somewhere that folks will be able to see it if they go to their computers tomorrow.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Commissioner Dubak.
So, when we met last week, we did ask staff to come back with some reductions. I know we had some discussion about how much fund balance we're comfortable spending. I think we all hopefully recognize, it's funny, we were having the debate last year about having way too much fund balance. And there was many of us saying that's our rainy day fund for if things turn, and with the pandemic, they turned very quickly. So spending fund balance to me is, if that's not a negative thing, that's why it's there for these times. And staff came back with a $1.4 million reduction, which is a significant reduction in the percentage of fund balance that we would be going through this year, which is going to help sustain us over several budget cycles should things turn before we can start rebuilding it again. So I'm really, I'm pleased with what they've come back with. I guess what I want to know for sure, and particularly with regard to general fund and public safety, but I want to make sure that we're not being in any of these cuts or delays penny wise and pound foolish. So I just want to know from staff, is there anything here that's being delayed or put off that's in 2 or 3 years going to end up costing us significantly more? Because that's really not helping if we need to sustain a 2-3 year downturn. I guess I'm just saying to staff, speak now. If there's anything here that gives you serious heartburn, I want that to be part of our conversation.
I'm not staff, but can I ask staff to be specific about what Commissioner Dubak was just asking? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I thinking exactly what Commissioner Dubak was just saying, when I'm looking at this, the ones I'm worried about are things that I think are going to be in heavy use over the next year. So that includes the senior center part-time staff, not moving from a part-time position to a full-time position. I think that's, my understanding is that's Chef Erin that would be promoting to a full-time position. And she provides a ton of services at the senior center and is going to be a major go-to for some of the programming we're talking about doing virtually over the rest of the summer. And I just wonder if the services we're going to need to be providing out of the service center, out of the senior center, would benefit from Chef Erin's kind of vision and creativity as she comes up to providing those services in this new manner. So I wondered about that. And I also wondered about the facilities manager. We had talked about how that could possibly save us money in some respects. And then lastly, I wondered about the WROK van. If we're going to be doing, right now they're just doing so much more broadcasting than they have done previously, to my understanding. I wondered if that was, so those are the three that caught my eye as perhaps meeting those criteria. Curious to hear what staff have to say.
Yeah, so I can speak to the senior center Full-timer, I think you are right. That position would be critical to kind of the future of our programming when we're taking the long view about how we want to innovate there. I think that is critical. So I think you said that pretty well. The facilities manager position, I know that's been moved around. There's a lot of talk with that in staff. I still think that's a really good idea. But there is a lot to consider even bringing that person on and getting them acclimated with it. I don't see us doing that in the immediate future. So even if that were to be done in this fiscal year, that might be towards the tail end of it. And in that way, it seemed like a reasonable cut to me. I don't know if somebody else wants to talk about the WROK ban, but as I understand it, it's that what it was originally slated to be replaced with is actually far more than what Richard Wilson needs, actually. Am I right about that, Julie?
Correct. It was about $600,000 originally.
So I think you could still get what they need considerably cheaper than what was listed.
And for what it's worth, that van is purchased with PEG monies. And those are really restricted on how we can use that. So.
Sorry, could you say that again, Julie? They're purchased with what money?
PEG, the PEG money. Yeah. Very restricted on the hardware and equipment that we can purchase with those monies. And we have a significant restricted fund balance in the general fund. It's well over $500,000.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. So I want to make clear that I understand what you're saying is if we don't spend that money, it would in fact go back to the general fund, but it wouldn't be available for pretty much any other use, even into the future, because it's restricted to buying exactly this type of equipment. Yes, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so it'll look better on the balance sheet, but will not in fact improve our financial position.
Unless we have, over $500,000. In fact, I think it's significantly over $500,000 of other things slated that we know we want or need that qualify, but I'm not aware of that.
So. If I'm understanding correctly, it's basically for communication equipment or things related to communication.
The WROK communication.
Yeah, the PEG money.
I have a question for Aaron too. Aaron, you have 2 additional positions in Parks and Rec, in Parks and Forestry, based upon the fact that Normandy Oaks is going to open this year, or at least that was the projection. If it looks like it might not because of COVID-19 and how construction has been slowed down, are those 2 positions still essential, or is it something that could be put off until a half a year, maybe consider it again in January and see where we are? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that they're both essential, but in suggesting a cut, I actually parted back a little bit to one position. But either one of those could be, we could wait a little bit of time to maybe bring on the second one towards the end of the year, but I would really strongly suggest that we would bring on the first one shortly after July, because it is essential. Even Normandy Oaks notwithstanding, there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done. And I would say there's a value in that, even without that consideration. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
And then once the park gets rolling and we kind of see where we stand from a budget perspective and also, what it's actually taking to maintain that park, we can decide to go with a second, maintenance position, again, targeted because of the incremental maintenance that Normandy Oaks will drive, but, in a way can be used across the city.
That's right.
So a little bit of a wait and see.
Yeah.
Go back to the PEG money for a bit, just to make sure I understand what it can be used for.
I assume that was a question mark at the end of that statement, Commissioner Vassar?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Rudd?
Yeah, I would have to get the legislation, but generally speaking, I only have a general description. mostly hardware type things. So related to like WROK broadcasting.
So like cameras, mics, vans,
Yeah.
things of that nature.
Um,
Studio equipment.
Correct.
were any of those funds used in the development of the new city hall to make it accessible for broadcasts?
Yeah, anything new? Yes.
All right, so those funds have already paid for those things in the new city hall. That's not something we can explore right now as an additional way
Correct.
to get those funds.
Yeah, that'd be this year's budget. Okay. So-
Ms. Rudd,
Okay, Ms. Macy or Commissioner Macy.
thank you. Are there other things in this list that are like that? That would be so restricted that it's, you know, we can hold them in our fund, but we're basically holding them just to a later point for the same purpose?
Just restricted within their funds.
Mayor?
Dubak?
Yeah, I mean, I understand Commissioner Macy's point, but I think there's value in making sure we're sustaining fund balance going forward, because I think all funds are going to be seeing a slowdown in revenue over the next year or two. So if we put things off that can be put off just for a year, even though that's what the funds are restricted to, at least then we can make more informed decisions a year from now based on how the fund is impacted, given the economic challenges we may or may not be facing. We don't really know how dire it will or won't be at this point. So I understand that those are restricted, but maintaining healthy fund balance, into the next year makes sense to me.
I think you're also going to have this situation, just to echo some of those comments, Commissioner Dubak, is, like I see a roof in there in the fire station for $290,000. And what happens if all of a sudden, we get a torrential downpour or a storm and something happens? You put these things in and sometimes it's unlikely that all of them are going to see fruition. And we're also going to see some surprises. And we've tried to account in our budget line items for a few surprises here and there. It's there's a little wiggle room in there. But I think given the severity of the climate we're in right now, I think, taking those things as we go throughout the year, we budget for this situation. And then we say, okay, well, it's unlikely that we're going to have to, everything's going well. We got more money. We got more statutory revenue in. We got some money from DC. We got some additional, we got a Headley override, whatever it may be. And now we can start to say, okay, well, we feel a little bit better. And this is actually the living, breathing budget process that we have. We approve amendments, I feel like at least once a month, once every other month, because, we budgeted 500,000. It came in at 400. Great. Oh, by the way, revenues are a little lower on this one thing. Okay. And so we're always making adjustments. I think we're probably going to see this thing back to us in August. We'll probably have more information. It could even be worse, depending on what that information is. But I think for a budget, I think some of these things can be pushed out, but they may not be, just because reality happens. But I think we plan for it and we budget for it and, play it by ear every month and, look and see where our fund balance stands and how we're tracking by month with Ms. Rudd's help. And if we're have a few months where we're doing a little bit better and we feel it's appropriate to, do a thing that we wanted to do that we didn't have in this budget, then okay, we can take a look at that and do it if it makes sense.
Mr. Mayor, just if I could follow up with one comment.
Yes, Mr. Gillen.
You touched on one thing. I was just going to point out a couple of the bigger ticket items that are on the list. The roof replacement at the fire station, HVAC work at the fire station, and then also roof replacement at the ice arena. Not to say that those aren't cuts that necessarily can be made, and I'd invite the chief and or Aaron to jump in if they wanted to, but I just wanted to point out that there will be a little bit of an offset. I think it's reasonable to assume because if we're not making those replacements, then there probably will be additional maintenance that's going to have to be done over the course of the year. So it still could be a net gain for the city, but it's not going to be all on the plus side, if you will.
I mean, if there's a leak or something happens, they're gonna have to patch it, and that costs money, right? Is basically what you're saying.
Right, right. Or if the HVAC goes out at the fire station, they're going to have to call somebody to fix it. So same thing.
I will, if I could add, to the point of the ice arena roof, those reflect really competitive labor prices right now. So there's that to consider, I suppose. That came in lower than what we had anticipated it. So that I think stands at $819,000 for that roof. That was bid at a time when things were really good. That's all changed. So, I mean, there is that likelihood that when we do go to that, there will be those increased costs. How much, I really don't know. And then there was also that risk that based on the assessment from the person who actually did the assessment, the leak is bad. It's not terrible right now. And he doesn't have any reason to believe that it wouldn't last another year. But in the event that it doesn't, the potential for the type of damage it could cause is pretty costly. So I'll just put that there.
And the ice arena fund, I mean, Ms. Rudd, remind me again, that's an enterprise fund, right?
Correct, and it does have the cash.
It does have the cash to do it. So it's one of those things where maybe this is one of those unique situations where, maybe it's a little bit more riskier than some of the other items. And the fact that it doesn't hurt our general fund balance or our public safety balance, maybe this is something we do because, we still want to have the ice arena. It still brings a tremendous amount of value to the community as far as hockey and ice skating and figure skating and ice dance and all of these great things. And it's used all the time. Maybe that's, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like this one, there is some risk that it's going to cost more or it's going to cost a heck of a lot more if that thing fails because the leak is bad. Just, and especially since it doesn't take away from public safety and it doesn't take away from, and if you're going to if you want to say, some of the catastrophic things, if this roof goes and then it gets green lighted next year that hockey can start and everything and you got one of the rinks down or the whole thing's underwater, that you're done. The arena's gone. You're going to lose a whole 2 years of revenue and it's just not going to be acceptable. So then you're back either taking the arena back as a city, negative funded operation or, you liquidate it.
Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Dubak.
Yeah, I see the logic in putting the roof on. I guess I'd want a better understanding of clearly there's no revenue coming in right now to the ice arena with no events happening. So what is the churn on that fund balance while nothing's happening? So we have the dollars there to roof it. Like how long can we sustain it while there's nothing coming in before we would have to dip into general fund to continue to sustain it? That's kind of the kind of thing I'd like a view to. Because I have no problem putting the roof on as long as we're not putting general fund dollars at risk if that fund does go dry because they're not allowed to do what they do to generate revenue into the enterprise fund.
Yeah, there's a risk there too. You're right. Ms. Rudd, do you have that ice arena fund again?
That's the one I sent to you.
Yeah, you emailed it to us.
Yeah. They have a very healthy fund balance. So that forecast, let me see, has a slight loss this year based on the revenues being not coming in through June 30th. So a slight use of fund balance by like $7,000. However, it's assumed that July 1 programs would begin again. Now, if that's not correct, the 2021 revenue budget is off. So I'm not sure if Mr. Filipski wants to comment on when he's thinking programming can ramp back up. If that's still a fair assumption, that it's July.
Well, in some capacity, as we seem to be like phasing in the ability to group people together. I don't know. I would let John speak to that. I mean, I think that's a little optimistic, perhaps. But I mean, everything changes, and it really depends on what they're permitted to do at that time. That's it. One other point to that, since I have the floor here, about doing the roof. I suppose, being that things are shut down, if they could start in this in July, and let's say there's no program going on, or very little, it would be less disruptive to any kind of revenue that would be coming in. Now would be the time to do it, I suppose.
That's a pretty good argument.
Yeah. What's the fund balance right now, Ms. Rudd, in the Ice Arena Fund?
I'm pulling it up right now.
Sorry, I'm nervous on this computer to get to my email and lose a connection. That happened to me a little bit ago.
I'm looking at it now. It's like 2.1 million fund balance at the end of this year.
Yeah, you need to look at what I have on the screen now. I had sent an email because that's the budget summary table that went sideways in the budget document, and I sent an email out. And if you can't get to that email here, can you see it on the shared screen that I have up for now?
The far left of the spreadsheet is cut off.
I can see the 919,000 is the balance at the end of this year, and then 919 goes back up, and then we have expenditures of 2 million, which is basically the 800,000 going from 1.1 to 2 million, which is the roof, right?
Correct, and that's the roof at 860. The bid actually came in at 819, so things will look a little better than that, but still have about $270,000 in fund balance. And then if you look at the forecast, they have revenues exceeding expenditures. If this year went the way it was supposed to and the COVID-19 didn't impact, it would have been that way this year. You see that the entire quarter was impacted by COVID, yet they almost break even. So they do have they are generating plenty of revenue to replenish that fund balance there in the forecast. If they're able
if next year we used up the fund balance, we're looking at, okay, basically if revenues dropped by, if we did the roof and then revenues dropped by 288,000 on 1443, I don't know what that math, roughly, I don't know, 20% or so. My math isn't perfect in my brain right now, but 288 divided by 1443 equals, it's about 19.95%. So if revenues drop by 20% next year because of COVID-19, that fund balance would go away.
Well, except expenditures would also drop.
That's probably true too. I would imagine some of the expenditures would drop. So, I don't know what the contribution margin is per hour of the ice arena, but that's a good point because you're not doing the Zamboni, you're not doing a number of things, but
you probably don't even have ice there.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, even if we take half, you're probably pretty well protected. It's the next year after that you would have to worry about, but if we're going 2 years without being able to play hockey or have any programming at the ice arena, I think, that's something that we're going to have other issues in the economy and in our city, as well. That won't be a priority, put it that way. If we're still in a situation where you can't have hockey for 2 years in a row, it's we're in a completely different situation. That means that something terrible has happened on top of what already terrible has happened. So worst case scenario, you lose, like 6 months of next year, 600,000, you use up 288 of fund balance, and you could easily argue 300,000 of expenses you wouldn't endure, you know? I mean, I don't know, Aaron, are the fixes mostly, are the expenses mostly fixed at the ice arena, or is there a lot of variable tied to revenue?
No, I would say in terms of maintenance, for maintenance items that like my department would be involved in, there's nothing that we foresee right out in front. Was that your question? Kind of, do I foresee?
No, what the fixed cost? I mean, we see Commissioner Macy brings up a good point. Like if revenues are down, you know, I just said the 288,000, you know, if revenues were down 20%, that would eat up the fund balance. But she also makes a good point that, well, there's variable expenses in that expense account, right? I mean, some of them are fixed, but the variable amount, I don't know of how much of the, looks like around 1.2 million of the expenses every year are variable. I would assume half could be, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem unreasonable for an operation, but is it all fixed expenses, or is there a lot of variable, or is there a decent amount of variable expense in there as well?
Well, I think a lot of the expenses are kind of proportionate to revenue. So, I mean, when you have that decline, as you said, or somebody said earlier, that would go down. But I thought you were questioning specifically about maintenance. Is that?
I just use that as an example. Like there's probably some fixed expense. Like you need somebody in there to, I don't know, the ice. You probably keep the ice frozen. You got to pay an electric bill on the place. You got to have security. You got to clean it.
Energy down, and yes, those. Okay, I see your point. Yeah, so a lot of those will be down on account of it being closed. Sure. Yeah. Particularly the energy cost. There's no ice there right now.
Okay. So, yeah, I imagine that. I mean, I don't know what those numbers are, but I would expect that if revenues are down 50%, we're probably not using up all the fund balance on that next year. So meaning that if they can't start playing hockey till December of the next fiscal year, we still would need away at that fund balance. At least it's a hypothesis. And it looks like Ms. Rudd is looking at fixed and variable right now.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the utility costs, what those savings might be if there's no ice there. So you get.
I see like contractor worker services are 680,000. Like that's a big one. I mean, how does that work if there's no hockey?
I would have to see what that covers, what particular services.
That's the suburban ice contract.
Oh, the itself. Okay, the contract. Yeah.
That's half of it.
Mm.
But if they're not paying for instructors and they're not paying, you know what I mean? Like even that, it probably could be variable within that. It's not fixed, I imagine.
Right.
So, I mean, what we could do is decide as a team, do we leave it in there? Or do we leave it out? I mean, it is an enterprise fund, but upon a little bit more further study, you know, Mr. Filipski could bring it back to us, you know, in August and say, hey, you know, worst case scenario, you know, the 288,000 based on a formula, we would have to have 10% of our next year. You know what I mean? It probably makes sense to Ms. Rudd what I'm saying. I'm not translating very well. I'm trying to stay away from.
I could just add though, the prices as quoted are good through July 30th only. So
okay,
further than that.
So you could bring it to us in a meeting in July. You know, budget without it. Then you could come to us and say, hey, I did more research. Honestly, you know, if it's gonna have to be a whole, because of the variable and fixed costs and you know, the fund balance, if the ice arena could be shut down through August of next year, and you know, we would use up the fund balance by then, and then we can make a decision, right? Because you make a good argument that it should be repaired when nobody's there. That's a good point. And on top of it, it is an enterprise fund, so we can't really, you know, use it anywhere else. And three, you know, we have 288,000 in there after we do the roof repair. That's a pretty healthy fund balance. And what would it take? How long until that fund balance would be used up? How many months would, if the restriction stayed in place? So I'm assuming because you have some fixed costs, you basically, it would be your variables would go away, your revenue went away, and then you would just be, that 288,000 would be, if our fixed costs are, 30,000 a month, then it would be about 10 months before you'd eat away at that. Does that make sense? And like having that information, then we can vote on it, whether or not to do the roof, and then add it back into the budget without having any consequential impacts on our general fund or public safety fund.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking. Go ahead.
Commissioner Perush.
Can regular programming go on while the roof is under repair, or does regular programming have to stop? I think I understand why you targeted it for the summer, because there's no programming going on. But if we were to say, okay, in September, things look pretty good, let's repair the roof, is that going to impact on programming? I'm assuming it will, but maybe not.
It will. I in a good, with cooperative weather, they can usually put one of these things on, one of these roofs on in a week and a half, 2 weeks. So, I mean, that's the kind of span of time. It's not the entire arena, so programming could occur in the other slabs of ice, but so yeah, it would. I mean, there would be programming there later in the year at that time that it would have some effect on. But not knowing what programming we have, it would be hard for me to say exactly how in dollar terms that would affect me.
Yeah, that'd be hard to estimate. But I think we just have to keep that in mind, that if we delay it into the fall, but assume that it's going to go forward in terms of the repair, it's going to have some impact on revenue because it'll have an impact on programming. So
yep.
There's a downside to not doing it in the summer if we really think it should be done.
Mayor?
Commissioner Douglas.
Yes, I mean, I've been sitting here, hearing the 6 of one, half a dozen to the other argument, which is really, it seems to me, do the roof or not do the roof. And if it's sort of a coin toss, I would say go forward with the roof. We've got a favorable quote on it. The bidding work has been done. We've got a bidder or a contractor ready to perform the service at a time when maybe they're not doing any other work. Even if we take a slight fund balance hit next year, we'll make it up in subsequent years. So I guess I would say do the roof.
All right, I see a lot of thumbs up. It was my business. I do. All right. Good. You can cover the ice now, Aaron. All right. So that was what outside our general fund, and that seemed to be our biggest ticket item. And I'm sorry, I'm messing with my computer here to get back to the screen. What other, I think maybe Mr. Gillum, Ms. Brake, Ms. Rudd, can you kind of help us understand we've kind of gone through all over the funds. We've asked a few questions on some of the homework we gave staff to go back and see what, other things there might be there to, postpone. What are you hoping from us tonight? What will help you, and what sort of decisions do we need or guidance do we need to give you tonight, moving forward to get a final budget for us on, is it June 4th or June 8th?
June 8th, yeah. Mr. Mayor, one thing I would encourage the commission to talk about are the requests that various department heads made for additional personnel. I think with the exception of the assistant to the senior center coordinator and the parks and forestry worker, and then the facilities manager, the other, the city hall positions that were discussed, those are all still on the table. Department heads did not back off on those. Those department heads all feel that those are positions that are necessary for their department. So if you're still comfortable filling those positions, that's fine. But if you're not, I think now would be the appropriate time to have the discussions. I think all the department heads that are involved are participating in the meeting tonight and can give you their thoughts.
I think, for me, some of it's timing, right? When I look at the clerk's office, we have an election coming up in November. I think she made a very compelling case. You know, I don't have an issue putting them in the budget, but the challenge that I want is that we just don't necessarily go on a hiring spree, you know, tomorrow. That, you know, if there's any sort of timing where or cadence where we say, hey, we're going to look at these positions, you know, a quarter into the year or halfway into the year, or a quarter into the year, and talk about them, and then we can start the hiring process. I think we're going to need, before we go out and necessarily hire all of them, you know, get at our very next meeting a list of requests to fill these jobs. I'd like to have a little bit more time pass and get a little bit more information as far as where we stand. So personally, I don't have an issue putting it in the budget. I think they all make good cases. I think from the assessing office, you know, that pays for itself. You know, to give you just an example there, but, you know, is the expectation that after we approve a budget, immediately the requests go out, and then in July we're having to look at these positions all at once? I mean, I think there's a process here that goes along with the budget that we have to feel comfortable with as well. Because if things get a little darker, you know, 2 million more people are unemployed from last week, 40 million now. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like, and I think it's okay planning for it. I think it's okay to say we're going to eat fund balance, but we could have another hit to revenue. We don't know. Any thoughts on that from my colleagues? Commissioner Perush? Pat, can you unmute Commissioner Perush?
There, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, I have to learn how to do that properly before I start talking. I sat down yesterday and just kind of went through a lot of this stuff and identified just a couple of positions that I thought could be deferred, perhaps not for the entire year, but at least for 6 months until we get a better handle as to how this is all going to come down in terms of actual state shared revenues that they're going to cut and actual assistance that we may or may not get from the county or the state or the federal government. And the three that I identified as three that could be perhaps put off for 6 months are the appraiser, the accountant in finance, and the facilities manager. I think the clerk position is going to be essential. It's not just the November election. We've got a big one in August as well. The parks maintenance position, I think Aaron is correct that he needs one. I'm not so sure that we could budget two right now. Perhaps that's another one that could be deferred for 6 months. And I think the senior citizens coordinator position is pretty essential. They've been short-staffed for a long time, and it's had an impact on their ability to provide some services. And I don't think that's a good thing. But I think perhaps the appraiser and the accountant, one of the parks maintenance people, and perhaps the building facilities manager could be at least deferred for a while. And that's just my thoughts right now.
Commissioner Macy?
I just wanted to ask, I saw Mr. Brake had proposed not filling his assistant position, and I wondered if that change was reflected in the budget already or not. And does the budget assume there will be an assistant to Mr. Brake?
It does include that amount. And so just kind of in the spirit of other departments proposing some reductions, I propose to delay filling the position since it's going to take me some time to get acclimated. So I concur with Commissioner Perush that we monitor the budget as Director Rudd suggested, that likely in August that we'd be coming back with additional adjustments. So once we're into the new fiscal year, we'll have it better handled. So, on the assistant position, I had this conversation with City Attorney Gillum of the role of this assistant, elevating it to more of an operations chief or a deputy city manager. But if the time isn't right, then have that revert back to the position as it exists as the assistant too. So I'm, long and short of it, what I'm trying to say is giving the commission some flexibility Whatever tools I'm given, I will make that work. But there are some opportunities to advance and alike by elevating that position and looking for efficiency improvements. And that's why I advocated elevating the role of that position.
I think Ms. Rudd, or Mr. Brake, do you know, and Ms. Rudd, so the kind of the pushing off of that is that it's not a line item in here that we can see in the general fund. Because is that something that would be additional to this, or was it comprehended somewhere else in here? Or my eyes going berserk on me?
So the full assistant to the city manager, that position that was recently vacated by Mr. Kazan, that is budgeted still.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So Mr. Drake spoke about elevating that, so that would be a higher cost, but only having it funded for a certain percentage of the year. So we don't have a cost on that yet. So, you know, there'll be some savings. Probably not the entire cost of the assistant to the city manager.
Got it. So we're saying we have it as the lower position in here right now. Mm-hmm. The request was to have a more elevated position to deal with more complexities, efficiencies, operations, things of that nature, to bring more value to the city, and savings potentially to the city. But that isn't, it's just so it's hedged vis-a-vis the old position.
Right.
Okay, so dollars wise, it makes sense. Head count wise, it's a wash. Got it. I mean, I think, is it going on what Commissioner Perush said? Is it hard to say, or how would we go about saying, if we said, hey, look, the clerk's office, we definitely need that. It's coming in on, around the corner here. You can't, by August, we'll be looking at this again, and, the election will be a month away, 2 months away. Is it hard for us to make, not a fast rule, but to say, hey, basically all we could, for the budget purposes, push out for half the fiscal year. And then, I think Commissioner Perush, you did mention, I know one with the parks, we had eliminate one parks worker. So I think that kind of covers a little bit of that. But if we just as a general rule, and then as the staff believes that things become urgent or essential or whatever, they bring those positions to us, to look at in a more specific context at that time. I saw Commissioner Perush, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just don't forget there's an August primary. You keep mentioning the November election in terms of relationship to the clerk's office work. They're going to start sending out absentee ballot applications for the August primary at the end of June or early July. So they're working up really fast.
That's my point, is that we probably shouldn't apply that rule to the clerk's office position.
Okay.
To everybody else, where we would say, hey, that's the most urgent one where you don't have time to think about it, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody else, if we could wait till 6 months into the fiscal year, it doesn't mean you can't bring it up tomorrow if something hits or hard, but it buys us some breathing room in the budget and some security in the budget until August, when we can see we have better clarity on revenues, especially with the statutory amount coming from the state, and also, frankly speaking, from the county and from the feds. So, and then if August we don't have clarity, we bought ourselves a little bit more time. Maybe in October we have clarity. And then if we have more coming in, we can make that decision what we do with each position based on where the budget stands at that time. That's kind of how I'm feeling. This is not a one and done process, unfortunately, given the climate today. Just like we're doing at home every day, every month, every week, we're looking at our grocery expenditures, and we're looking at, forecasting what next month will look like. And if it's, furlough days and whatever, then, you realign your budget. If you found some money somehow, sold your truck on accident, whatever, then maybe do some other stuff, but it shouldn't be any different from the city perspective. Any thoughts? I better move to the bigger screen because I'm missing half here right now. Not that I don't love looking at all the documents Ms. Rudd prepared. They're very nice and readable. I see Commissioner.
Share screen. If,
Well, I got a weird setup here.
okay.
Commissioner Lavasser.
Thank you. I appreciate that there's a lot of things that we would like to be doing here. A lot of new employees that certainly can be justified, but I'm very concerned about the big hole we're looking at in the budget here. The funds that are draining out from the fund balance, and fund balance it's great to have for a tough economic times, and we're having that right now. But the problem is the funds, as we're looking at right now, flowing out way too fast. Looking at the extended forecast, we're getting to we're getting to the point where we will not have any options because the fund balance will be completely depleted in just a couple of years. So I think we need to be getting some more direction right now, some more suggestions right now from the various department heads. Where else can we save some money? Where else can we shed some costs? We got the 1.3 million that Ms. Rudd shared with that earlier, but that still leaves us with 3.6 million of fund balance that's being used here in the general fund. And I'm not saying we need another $3.6 million worth of cuts, but I'd like to see a lot more ideas on where we can put in some cuts for this budget year. Maybe some of them we decide not to cut, and we decide to use fund balance, but we got to have some ideas here coming from staff, and the sooner we get to it, the better. One thing I know, we've got the voluntary furlough program going on. That may lead to some savings, and perhaps it's too early to know what those savings would be, but certainly to the degree that staff can give us some projections on what we're going to save for that first month of the fiscal year, that may help, as well as bring the numbers into line.
Commissioner Dubak.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, but I think, what the situation we're dealing with is the same that every other local state government is dealing with, is that we just came out of a tremendous recession and crash, right? We have said multiple times, and in spite of campaign rhetoric, that the city is still operating on a skeleton crew staff-wise compared to staffing levels 15 years ago. So we're running a very, very efficient city. So in the same way that the state and other cities in the county don't just have a lot of fat to trim, neither do we. The reason that we didn't staff up as quickly as some might have liked was so we could build a healthy fund balance for this case. So that we can continue to offer essential services and maintain a high quality city that's running efficiently and effectively. So we're not getting to the point where we're cutting to the bone that people are really disappointed with the quality of services, even though they're paying their taxes. So as stressful as the financial situation might be, or potentially, set ourselves up in the best possible way by not overspending these last 10 years as we've come out of this recession, by building up this fund balance, and it's here for a reason. And now we did ask staff to go back and sharpen their pencils, and they did, and they came back with an additional 1.4 million in savings, which expands that projection out of fund balance. And those projections are also before we've asked staff to make further cuts in those budget cycles. So if we have a fund balance and are spending at this level for the next, if we can see out 4 to 5 years, assuming the worst, I think that's a reasonable place for us to be given the circumstances. And I don't want to start cutting to the bone and cutting essential services and really harming quality of life in our city, and putting a tremendous burden and unrealistic expectation that's on our staff to deliver, if we do not have to. So I think the cuts that have been proposed, combined with Commissioner Prush's recommendations on delaying some of those new hires until we have a better view to it, I think that is a responsible way to move forward, especially given so many unknowns at this point. But the idea that we can keep going back to the well without doing harm to the city, the idea that there's just so much fat to trim, it's not recognizing the situation we just got out of over the last 8 years.
And I'll just echo that. I mean, we're completely lean. We did an ICMA study that said, okay, you need 79 sworn officers, 53 firefighters. In fact, arguably, you know, we got to check those numbers again at some point, right? You know, if you're talking about creativity, I don't know that there's anything creative in the budget. What you're really suggesting, and I'm happy to listen, what are you going to cut? Are you going to cut 20 cops? Are you going to cut all the park maintenance so we don't have any trees trimmed? We don't have any of the grasses cut? Are we just not going to repair, you know, water mains when they break? We're not going to do sewer maintenance and have backups in basements. I mean, we are so lean right now. You know, I don't know from a creativity perspective, you know, I mean, yeah, you can find probably a position or two here or there. You save $100 grand for the city and you make a bunch of extra people work hard. All of our corporate departments have, or administrative departments have, you know, 1 to 2 people. I mean, you know, what are you going to do? Cut and not, you know, do financial reports for the city? You're going to cut the clerk's office and not do birth certificates? I mean, we're at a point where if we can't, if we go back and challenge staff, then what you have to do is you have to challenge and say, I don't value this service. I don't value our parks. I don't value our firefighters. I don't value our cops. And what is that amount if we were to trim it? And I know that's not, I'm not suggesting anyone saying that, but I'm saying that's the point where we're at. Like Commissioner Dubuck said, coming out of the budget, we've been working bare bones. I mean, we were up close to 400 people. We're down to 300 and work's gotten harder. It's gotten a lot harder. Commissioner Perush.
3 things. I went back and looked at the old statistics and we maxed out with city employees at 351, and that was in fiscal year 2007, 2008. So that was our peak. And we're just, we're down from that just a little under 20, maybe 18. I can't do the math. That's the first point. We're nowhere near where our maximum employee levels were 10 years ago. The second thing is I think it's really interesting to note that even though there are, I think, 7 additional positions in this budget as it was originally presented, that was done even though the millage rate went down. So department heads were able to find additional sources of revenue in their budget, and certainly some expenses like certain debt payments went away finally because the debt was finally paid off, which gave us a little bit of a financial cushion there. But I think it's important to note that they were able to add these positions without increasing taxes. In fact, the taxes are going down. That's the second point. The third thing is that we were talking about the motor pool earlier, and Julie identified about $410,000 that might be able to be taken out of the general fund if we were to make the motor pool cuts. And that's something that I think we might be able to add into the amount that we're reducing this evening, the 1.3 million. If I'm understanding that correctly. If I'm not, then let me know. But it seems to me that's another 400,000 plus a little bit that we could add on to the amount that we're taking this down this evening, if everybody's comfortable with that.
Commissioner Lavasser.
All right, declaring ourselves already lean doesn't solve our issue, doesn't solve our problem. We need more ideas presented to us from staff. And I would ask Mr. Brake to go to staff and say to each one, I need you to make suggestions for me. You know, get me this percentage of a reduction, or an idea that may give us this percentage of a reduction. We can bring it up. We can talk about the ideas. We can debate whether it makes sense for us to do, but we need to have these suggestions come to us so that we do have options, and we aren't getting ourselves in a situation where we're truly going to be in dire straits in just a couple of years because our fund balance is totally depleted.
Yeah, Commissioner Lavasser, I appreciate that. And this budget is not a brainstorm of all the work we're going to do in the next year. I mean, we have great staff. Julie Lyons-Bricker brought us a tremendous amount of savings through her work on some of the utility stuff. So staff is always challenged and pushing the envelope to find these opportunities. But I think what we're talking about here is a budget. And I think that's good to say, go and, you know, as part of the management process that we have and that Mr. Brake can bring to the table, like we want to see more savings. But as far as doing a budget, when you're talking about high level line items, you know, I think that going back to staff and saying doing a whole year's worth of work of cost savings ideas and present them tomorrow is not how business works. Mr. Brake, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Let me offer this up. It's, I'm 5 days into it right now and won't be able to give you immediate savings. But when we're at this point, this time next year, I've explored very, very preliminarily with Director Rudd, some programs that I've used in other organizations where I've worked, where we can really better leverage our resources. So it's not a matter of cutting positions or reducing services. How can we leverage the money that we spend? And there's ways of doing that through rethinking processes, also using private-public partnerships. I want to introduce those slowly. Again, this won't help to button up the budget, but what I'm conveying to you is that I'm rising to the challenge as we look into the future years, because I agree with Commissioner Lavasser that this is not a sustainable arrangement, and will put us in a worse position if we continue on. So I think there are some ideas of ingenuity, staff involvement, like I said, how we can leverage those dollars, and I'm hoping that we can lessen the need to draw on our resources and bring us back to where we have a balanced budget, but also maintain quality service. It's maintaining that perfect balance. So that's the challenge, and I'd say give me a chance to explore that and kind of introduce some new concepts, but it'll take some time to develop with staff. And but I remain optimistic in future years, assuming that the economy doesn't go entirely south on us. But if the economy holds steady and we look at a longer term recovery, I think there's ways that we can leverage these funds.
Commissioner Dubak.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Brake. So I'm curious for what your thoughts are, looking at where we're at this year, looking at what staff just brought us with 1.4 million in reductions. Is it a good process for us to say, bring us, an arbitrary number, 15% more? Should we set a target for what we want to burn in fund balance? And do you have input on what that would be as an appropriate number percentage wise? I understand you're not fully versed in our budget yet, but just from a top line point of view, given what we have, the potential risks over the next few years, is there a number, a percentage of fund balance we should be shooting to limit our expense to?
Well, ordinarily, I think Director Rudd will tell you, and this is what the advice that the auditors give you, at a bare minimum, you should be looking at a 2-month reserve. So it's around that 17% level in that regard. So let me fill you in my last few months that I went through. The organization that I came from was under a different state system when we were required to, we adopted the budget late in March. Then the city council there, we did a budget revision immediately following. So this is, I'm going through this a second time around, and the pattern that we're using here is very similar to what was done in my previous city where I work. I feel entirely comfortable. And again, I go back to where we carefully monitor the budget, and what Director Rudd said, that it would not surprise me that come August, when we have a better idea of really truly what the state revenue sharing is looking like, what the impact potentially is on property tax revenues. We won't have an entire crystal ball, but I think we'll have much better information to give you to make an informed decision. Keep in mind, the budget, it's a living document. So I think we get too hung up if we want to make this perfect. We're going to have to be tweaking this as we go along, and the mayor has alluded to that. So that's a strategy that I would suggest to you, that we don't make any real drastic changes until we really have firm information. So for me to say, well, you need to make a 15% or a 30% reduction, that would be very arbitrary. I would want some pretty hard data to back that up. If there's state economists that are saying that, look, property tax revenues are going to fall by this percentage, then by all means, then I'll present that information to you. But until such time, I think taking this incremental approach, that would be my advice, and what I feel comfortable with.
I think you articulated that very much better than I did. I agree. We don't want to make rash decisions that cut to the bone until we know what do we actually have to do. And, with regard to property values, I've been reading a lot about how there's a traditional tie between the unemployment rate and property values. But we've never had an unemployment situation like this that's caused by just turning off the economy and what happens when it slowly gets turned back on. So the data and projections, it's much harder to draw conclusions from that, right? So I think looking at the cuts that have been proposed, making strategic decisions and revisiting in August is the right play. I'm not inclined to tell staff to go back and bring back a whole lot of arbitrary cuts we don't know we need to make right now.
Commissioner Perush?
Just keep in mind that your property taxes are going to be based on the assessed values that they were on December 31st, which was before all this happened. And back on December 31st, our property tax assessment values in the city were pretty darn good. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to be able to pay their taxes this year because of the economic situation, unemployment, and so on and so forth. But in terms of the actual property tax value and the revenue that it's going to generate, it's going to be based on values before all this happened. My concern is going to be next year, because if there's a drop in property tax values, it will show up on this coming December's assessment or the values at that point in time, which means it'll affect next year's budget. I'm concerned that that's when we might take a hit in property tax revenues. This year, I'm not concerned about, because it's pretty much set the way it is. Whether or not people can pay is another issue, but in terms of the actual values and the taxes that it could generate, it's going to be quite good.
And keep in mind that not every time there's a recession does that mean that property values go down. I mean, it's kind of regional a little bit, but I think the last 3 out of the 5 recessions, property values have gone up, and one of those recessions was all dealing with speculative real estate. So you could say 3 out of the 4, I'll say, normal recessions, we didn't see big dips in property value dropping. But to what Commissioner Perush's point, we have a good idea what next year is going to look like. It's probably pretty stable. It's the state statutory revenue that we're really worried about, and maybe the other shared revenue that we have to keep an eye on and keep at pace with our expenditures. Going into next year, I mean, why would I cut 20 cops and 20 firefighters this year on speculation? That seems like a horrible idea. I'm still employed, thank God. Thank God I still have a job, but I haven't gone and sold my house yet, because there's a chance I could be laid off. I'll wait till I get that layoff notice before I, decide what to do with my, major expenses, if I have to liquidate my retirement or do whatever. I mean, we're kind of I'm trying to make a personal example here, but, it applies to our operations as well. I'm not feeding my kids strictly, rice and beans right now. But, we made some cuts, but we haven't, totally. But if there's no money coming in, then you do it, and I think the city's the same. Hey, when, right now we have a reasonable idea of what revenues are going to be, a reasonable idea, we're going to dip into our savings. And if next year looks even bleaker and we know property values are going to be down, state shared revenue is going to be down, then we have a completely different conversation on our hands as far as what we're going to do. But needless to say, I mean, we have Mr. Brake on board, who's going to work with us to find, part of our strategic planning this January should be to address new ideas that bring higher service levels at lower cost for our citizens. We should focus on that. And certainly bringing ideas to us that, keep us in the black and not in the red, are going to be key. And obviously no frivolous expenditures this year, right? So, it's all need to have, not nice to have. And, we buckle down and we'll know more in 6 months. And like Commissioner DeBuck said, things are going to slowly ramp up. And when we do exit this crisis, there's a tremendous amount of pent up demand. Unlike the last Great Recession, where it's just a bunch of guys in suits and out of state, finagling with the real estate market, and we're not really sure what happened. This one's a lot different. This is repressed supply and repressed demand. And, I'm a little bit optimistic, and given a little bit of optimism, I wouldn't want to make drastic cuts to public safety, in terms of firefighters, cops, or even the folks that are making sure our water's clean and our, sewers are not backing up. The last thing people need being quarantined is to have their sewer backed up. So I don't want to cut any DPS guys right now, But if we ain't got the money down the road, you know, and it's very dire, then we have to look at that. But that's not we haven't been issued that red card yet. And we have a fund balance because we've been very disciplined over the last 10 years. We're very fortunate. So I think, I mean, we're at a point where we have a basic budget. We know we're going to come back. Is staff coming back to us in August, probably again with some revised numbers to look at the budget in a little bit more detail? I mean, is that, I'm hearing that, I'm here. I saw Mr. Brake. I'm not sure, Ms. Rudd. Yes. Okay. So, at least moving forward, what we have is we have some reduced revenue numbers up top. And then we have some suggestions made by staff, at least on the general fund. And then we kind of discussed about doing for the enterprise fund, the ice arena, go ahead in the roof. I mean, do we adopt I have a little bit of a problem with the local streets and roads. I mean, I mean, if we have the money in the road fund to do Main Street, I think we should do it, especially when, you know, I mean, it probably will happen at the end of the tail year, but some of those funds, I'm not sure that we hold off. If, like Commissioner Douglas said, I think last time, if the money's there, spend it, because you can't spend it on anything else, and it only gets more expensive with roads if you delay. But, you know, I think with the general fund, the ice, we implement those things. Commissioner Perush?
I don't know if the staff has heard anything from the state about reduction in gas tax revenues based upon the fact that nobody's driving. Is that going to impact revenue for major and local streets? Has anyone talked about that from Lansing?
Yeah, the state has some revenue estimates posted. Last I checked on their website, and I believe I sent that in the email. It's minor. Their projections are really minor. I'm kind of surprised by them. I think, let's see, I have them somewhere here.
Well, while Ms. Rudd's looking for that, I mean, the logic would be like if they came in lower, we'd have to pick a project that we're not going to do, and Ms. Donahue would come to us along with Mr. Brake and say, hey, you know, we're short $100,000. We're not going to do this. And we're going to have to wait till next year. I mean, that's kind of my understanding, is we'd have a budget amendment because we had a shortfall in revenue, and we'd have to find a corresponding expense.
That's right. And if I understand what Ms. Donahue said the last meeting we had, or maybe the one before, that a lot of these projects are not going to be bid out right away anyway. So we have some opportunities, some time to kind of get a better estimate as to whether or not those revenues are really going to get hit hard or not.
Right.
Maybe this is another thing for the August meeting, for the August review.
Mr. Mayor, I found the state reduction estimates between the current fiscal year and next year. In major streets, they're estimating a $1 million reduction. And then in local, because local is 25% of the gas tax revenues to the city, it is about $250,000. But however, if you look at both those fund balance summaries, the first major street is on page 163, and local streets on 175. The funds are doing very well. Significant fund balance.
Yeah, balances.
Okay, so we could take a hit of revenue this year and still be able to do for the project.
Yeah, you know, I think basically as it relates to the forecast or the projected columns, you know, what's going to be the new normal? Half the people are going to be working from home. So now, you know, in years 2, 3, and 4, and the new normal, our gas tax receipts going to be down significantly because, you know, what we found now are people can work from home. And really, I think that's the big question. However, with that, you have less wear and tear on the roads if people aren't traveling to work. So you might see a one for one, exchange. I don't know.
Hard to say.
excuse the pun, but the state's going to have to patch that hole for their own needs, for their state highway funds and everything too, you know? So they're going to have to come up, if gas taxes are down permanently, like next year or whatever, they're going to either have to raise rates or they're going to have to find another, you know, add it on to registration or find some other medium. I mean, it probably will never go to 100%, you know, but if it gets really dire, you know, oh, this is Michigan. You know, we have a lot of crappy roads and infrastructure that people just don't want to spend money on for whatever reason. But and maybe after what happened in Midland, people start to pay a little bit more attention to, you know, funding things properly and finding additional revenues to fund things properly. Or I should say, those two dams. So we need to give you a little bit of direction, Mr. Brake, Ms. Rudd, Mr. Gillum, about what to bring us on the 8th. Is anybody willing to take a shot at this, or do you want me to try to take a shot at it? I see Commissioner Perush motioning for her
Okay. Are you suggesting that we do something other than what we just did, which was pretty much agree with basically a lot of what the staff suggested, with some exceptions?
Well, I think, yeah, basically what I took is like basically what the staff certainly recommended through the general fund and for the ice arena. And then we talked about all new hiring positions that are in the budget. I said it, I think you said it, Commissioner Perush. I'm not sure I saw much debate or strong argument against it, but we at least do like a hold off of like 6 months on the fiscal year before, you know, at least hedge a little bit in the budget on new positions outside the clerk's office. That would be the only one. And you know, on top of what's already been presented, like the building manager and the parks, you know, doesn't mean these things, we can't entertain them. It's a living, breathing creature, like Mr. Brake said, but at least for the budget. And then we look at the road funds. I mean, if we have healthy fund balances in there, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate Ms. Donahue having the you know, putting it in there because we asked her to do that. But I don't know that we put off any of those expenditures if we have the funds to do them. I mean, I think that's a bad idea. I think if, you know, we do get into a pinch, come to us and say we're amending the budget. If we have the funds to do it, because you don't want to, you know, mess with your maintenance and roads and, you know, create a higher cost situation down the road. Excuse that, using that word 3 times.
So my question is do the staff need anything more from us other than what we just discussed this evening? Or can they bring us back a budget for us to adopt or consider in a week or two?
Commissioner Macy, I'll let you chime in.
I'm just wanting to see, make sure I understood. So are we, we're saying that the only position of the 7 that were proposed, that we're proposing to move forward with right now is the clerk's office? That's the only one?
And the senior center one?
And the senior center one, but not even one of the parks people?
And one of the parks people, sorry.
Yeah, but that parks position would be 6 months from now.
No.
No, you want it now?
Yeah. But then the other one, because he has 2. First one is authorized as of whenever the budget is adopted. But then the other one we hold off.
Yeah, the other one we hold off, which I saw like in the list that staff made, but if Normandy Oaks isn't going to be up and running this year, you know, do you hold off on the other one till, at least as a placeholder, till halfway through the year? Commissioner Dubuck.
So to be clear, the positions that we're putting a hold on, at least until August, or halfway through the year, those are not reflected in the current proposed staff cuts. So that's going to be a reduction in this year's budget above and beyond that 1.3 and change that we're looking at, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because you had the positions in there as pretty much a full role for the year, correct, Ms. Rudd? Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. We probably wouldn't be able to hire anybody in the next few months either. You know what I mean? So you're already going to be saving 20% in the next year on that, because, you know, once you get this thing approved and then you know, you'd be looking even at the earliest after interviewing and hiring and dealing with us, you know, probably 3 or 4 months anyways. Commissioner Dubak?
Sorry, and the motion did include doing the roof at the ice arena?
Yes, not the motion, no motion, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Commissioner Pershing made a motion.
Do we need a motion, Mr. Brake or Mr. Gillum?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's up to the commission, but
You would, you wouldn't think so, or you would?
no, I do not think you need a motion.
Okay.
I was going to echo the same thing.
Yeah, my sense is you're providing staff with direction at this point in time as to the form of the budget that will be brought back to you on Monday, June 8th.
Commissioner Macy.
I just wanted to check where we landed on the WROK van. I think I made an argument that we should keep it in the budget since it was it's only earmarked for that type of purchase specifically. I know Commissioner Dubak responded in saying we shouldn't be spending all of these revenue funds just in case, like we should keep them in the, but I just want to make sure, was he talking about that WROK van as well, that one particular fund that is very specific?
Commissioner Dubak.
Is that a question for me? I was speaking in general. So, yeah, like in the case of the ice arena, I think there's a strong case to be made why that expenditure is appropriate this year. I don't think we dug in on the van all that much, but I think there were some questions about could those dollars be repurposed to cover expenses in the new city hall, and the answer is no. So if they're only for equipment purchases, which I think what was explained to us, I don't see any value in delaying that purchase unless someone sees otherwise.
Okay. All right. Ms. Ryan.
I just want to clarify a couple things. On the general fund and public safety savings area, I just want to mention how I was going to do the resolution. The savings, which will look a little different now here, but the savings for the senior center, how that's going to impact the general fund is we're going to reduce the $350,000 transfer over to the senior center by the savings that are proposed. So that's how we're going to save the money. Right. In the general fund. Okay, just want to make sure. And then same with the public safety transfer right now is at 21 million. The savings here from the cuts in the fire department area, that $21 million transfer will be reduced by the savings in the fire. And then here, the suspending the third year of our motor pool catch-up program. Many years ago, when we had difficult times, prior to me working here, it was early 2000s or something. We did not collect depreciation from the department, so that we would not have that money there when we went to replace those vehicles or equipment. And so what occurred was there was a little over $4 million that we did not collect from the various departments. So we don't have that money over in the motor pool. So when we go to replace, we'd be short. So 3 years ago, we decided we were going to recoup that $4 million over 10 years. It's about $4.5 million. Well, this would be the third year next year. The total amount is about $440,000. 410 of that is assigned to the general fund. I would like to not only suspend the general fund, but also suspend it in the other funds, so it's not so confusing and it's easy to track. We can just say we suspended the third year completely, not just for the general fund. So I would make those adjustments, like for instance, here in the state construction fund. suspending the third year would save that fund $6,500. So I just want to make sure that's okay.
That's a reasonable request.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Macy.
So I already made this argument and lost, but I'm going to make it again. I still feel that we could wait on the high-speed absentee ballot counter until we re-examine the budget in August. I think if things are very, very dire, then our residents would be happy to wait an additional however many hours to get our results on election day. And if they're not as dire, then we can proceed as planned and make sure we continue to provide the absolute top best services in the clerk department of all of Oakland County. I know no one agreed with me last time, but I still feel that way, so I'm saying it again.
Commissioner Douglas.
I still disagree.
I did. Commissioner Perush.
I disagree as well. I think it needs to stay in.
Yeah, I mean, of all things, I think that machine, pays for itself, and I would prefer to cut somewhere else as opposed to that. I mean, overall, somewhere in the city as opposed to that, a line item, for me.
I hear what you're saying, but I think we're looking through this through the lens of elected officials who are very interested in the results every single year, whether or not it's a local election or not. I think for your everyday residents, how quickly those results come in are not a critical service of the city.
I think we got people already calling, voter fraud before the election has even occurred. And I want to make sure that we're absolutely prepared. And Michigan is a key state. And, I want there to be zero doubt that Royal Oak did their job perfectly when it came to counting the votes. And I think, I hear your point, Commissioner Macy. And if this were any other year, if this wasn't the first real presidential election with no reason absentee ballot voting and all of that, I'd be on your side. I think where I stray a little bit away from you is the fact that the conditions of this year are so much different. That's all. Commissioner Levasseur.
I would love to say yes to this, to the scanner, this ballot scanner, but we're talking $90,000. And that's not a small amount of money. I'm not convinced that it pays for itself. To have a sense of whether it pays for itself, I would need to know what type of labor it replaces, number of hours of employees, that sort of thing. I also need to have a sense for how much it changes the timing of the results, the counting of the ballots. Does it save us 6 hours? Does it save us 12 hours? Does it save us 2 weeks? And I don't have any of that. And so I'm with Commissioner Macy here. Even though I'd like to say yes to it, given the circumstances of our budget right now, I can't say yes to it without more information along those lines.
Well, I appreciate that, but we also have to understand that we do have the best clerk, I think, in all of the county who does an excellent job and has built a team around her that, I'll say that people go to as a resource to know, that the county even goes to as a resource to learn about how to do things right. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I put a lot of trust in her. I'm not going to micromanage. It's $90,000. The machine lasts 10 years. That's $9,000 a year. To make sure that we continue to be a world-class operation when it comes to elections seems like a fair expense. I saw Commissioner Gibbs and then Commissioner Duba.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with the ballot counter either. I think it's an awful lot of money, but I think there's there's many places that we can trim the budget. We've all had to trim our budgets, and that's a lot of money. And Melanie Hollis, our clerk, is great, and I'm not trying to take this away from her. I miss you, Melanie. I miss seeing you all the time. But I just think that's close to $100,000. I don't know.
Commissioner Dubak, Commissioner Macy.
Yeah, I said before, I first of all, I don't think caring about the results of our election in a timely manner is just of interest to political hacks. I think that's very much something that residents are aware of. It's a base government service that touches probably more people than just about anything else we do in a single day, or in this case, it'll be over a period of a month or so with all the absentee. And I think investing in a core government service and safeguarding the efficiency and efficacy of our democracy, it's not something to be debated. It's something we just do. Everything else is built on how well we run our elections and people's confidence that their vote was counted and counted accurately. And when days go by after an election, that confidence begins to erode. And that will happen when there is a 300, 400% increase in mail-in voting. So, I mean, I don't even see a real debate here. This is a basic government service and an expense that it is our responsibility to provide to safeguard our election.
Commissioner Macy?
Yeah, I just was going to follow up on Commissioner Gibbs mentioning that she sees a lot of places to cut in the budget. Like, now's the time to let's talk about what those things are, because we're trying to figure out if there's any other places we can cut. And if we're sending it back to the department heads, that's a lot of burden on them. And if you have some ideas, we'd love to hear them.
All right. I don't know if that was a question to Commissioner Gibbs or if she's going to respond, but it doesn't. If it was a rhetorical question.
Well, I'm not sure that I heard all of the question that Commissioner Macy said, because it was like bubbles were going in while she was talking. So if
I think she just asked, she said if there, and I agree, if you mentioned there's a lot of opportunities for cuts, if you have any ideas, now's the time to bring them up so we can discuss them and give the staff the feedback to put them into the budget, because like we talked about last time, the window that we have from June 8th is pretty narrow. It's the nature of the beast when you have a July 1st fiscal budget, and you do it the way we do it, which is very thorough and great. We get great awards, and finance team does an amazing job. If there is anything, sooner as opposed to later, I don't want to get to June 8th and get a new list of, we've had 3 or 4 budget meetings already. And I don't want to get I agree with Commissioner Macy, I don't want to get a new list of ideas on the 8th, if there is opportunities that have been identified out there that we should be discussing.
I think some of the staff, the suggested or the expansion on the staff can be cut, at least temporarily.
I think we kind of agreed to do that as a team, push those out with the exception of a position or 2. All right, anybody else? The staff feel pretty good where they're at right now? What they need to do, what your bet is, what your gamble is, get us a budget.
Yes.
And just so everyone's aware, we move forward on the 8th, right? And if we, we'll have the hearing on the 8th. Is that how we do it? And then approve it on
The 8th as well.
Okay. Or if we need the 22nd of June, that's the next time. If we need the 22nd, we got the 22nd. And then worst case scenario, folks, we're all in charge here. We got great staff. We got us. If we got to make adjustments in August, if we got to make adjustments on the fly, that's what we do. We should be looking at these numbers every day. This isn't a document we put on the shelf and then, aimlessly wander through the financial forest of doom. This is something that we're doing every day. So, Commissioner Macy?
I was going to ask, everyone's been saying August, and I think that was maybe a date proposed initially by Ms. Rudd or maybe department heads, I'm not sure. I just wonder why August. Will there be some numbers we'll have then that we're expecting by that point that we won't have in July, or that maybe we should have to wait to September? Just August is pretty soon, and I wonder what we're expecting to have changed.
Yeah, a couple updates that we could give. on, for instance, like some of the enterprise funds or like the senior center that has programming revenue, we'll then at least know how long we were truly closed for, when the programs, or how long the programs were not offered. So we'll have a better sense in that regard. Hoping the state is going to be giving some guidance, by July. I know they have their routines, but I think this pandemic, I would hope that they get out of their general routines on their periodic revenue estimations and do them more frequently. I would hope that, and I guess I might be naive, but I was hoping for that when I proposed this in the budget document when we put it together. Like I think a month ago, I put that in the letter that we would hopefully have a better idea of what their estimates are, and then also what we could do is if we're not getting guidance, whatever the commission and the city manager feels comfortable with, if they want to make their own assumptions, we can make changes on the revenue side of the budget based on our own assumptions. We have to.
Commissioner Newbuck?
I'd say also, there's a lot of debate happening in Congress and a lot of folks, including the National Governors Association, putting pressure on Congress to loosen up restrictions around the COVID relief funds to allow states to use them to backfill for lost revenue due to the economic impact of the pandemic, which would radically change our situation with regard to revenue sharing and road funds. So we might have a clear view to that at that point as well.
Commissioner Perush, and then Ms. Rudd, why don't you weigh in, and then Commissioner Perush.
I just wanted to ask one final question on the forecast that was emailed to you today. I had mentioned the assumptions that were used, and that also includes in the first projected column for 2021. And let me share this with you again here. Okay, I'm trying to put it over to my other screen and it won't work. Okay, can you see it now on the shared screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this column here, 2021, what this does, it's only a 2% improvement on state shared revenue, because that's the assumption we use in the original forecast, based on the significantly reduced number here for 2021. So my question is, would you feel comfortable with me adjusting this forecast for the revenue, assuming we pop back up to normal station revenue, maybe in 21, 22, or 22, 23?
Commissioner Perush.
I think ramping it up to 21, 22 is too early, Julie. I really think that it's not going to bounce back that quickly. I think we're going to see significant reductions in state shared revenues for the next couple of years at a minimum. So, maybe take it out a couple of years, but not right away the next year.
Okay. And how do you feel about the 2% improvement? Do you think that's appropriate, or maybe that can be beefed up a little bit?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know that we have anything to evaluate that on.
Okay.
I don't know that it makes a material difference for, it's probably a rounding error when we start to get out to the next couple of years. You know what I mean? I think for the current year, it's always pretty good, to get an idea. But I think moving out, I think you can include it in there because there probably will be some improvements. So I agree with Commissioner Perush, suck out at least for next year what, do a 2% about what we planned for this year, unless we have concrete guidance that, nope, this is fixed for next year. And then 2%, I mean, frankly speaking, there's probably a lot more fluff in there than 2% as far as unknowns. You're talking about moving the decimal point from, I don't know, to the tens of thousands of dollars to the hundreds of thousands of dollars when we're estimating a year out from now.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
The other point I was going to make was that Oakland County announced today that they have $30 million that they're going to be distributing to communities in Oakland County. That's a portion of their care funds. And of course, it's limited in how the communities that get that money can use it. In the press release, they mentioned public safety, but I don't know how broadly public safety is defined in that, in the way that the federal act is put together. So I know we're going to be getting something from Oakland County. We don't know, I don't think how much yet. But it's going to be able to be used someplace in the budget if we can identify that it is used for pandemic response. And it might be just in the public safety area, but that's another potential source of revenue, not only the federal government and the state government, but also the county. Yeah, but who knows how much it actually is going to turn out to be.
Okay. All right. You guys feel comfortable? So I suppose we can move on to the next agenda item, which is item number 6, the approval of the extension to contract for financial auditing services. This is something that from the last commission meeting, it was voted to bid these services out, but in lieu of more contemporary information that maybe Ms. Rudd can discuss, we put it on tonight's agenda for, I guess, a reconsideration of sorts with some adjustments. Ms. Rudd?
You were provided some information about the specifics about the anticipated staffing levels this fall due to some, I guess, medical family circumstances on the 2 primary staff members that work on the audit prep and coordination. And so with that information, I was hoping that rather than the 5-year extension, that we could just get the 1-year extension and then bid it out after this next audit season.
Commissioner Douglas?
So Mayor, you need a motion to reconsider here, and it needs to come from one of the people who supported the initial motion. So I will introduce a motion to reconsider the auditor selection discussion from our last meeting.
Well, okay, we have a second by Commissioner Dubuck. I do have a question for Mr. Gillum. Is that, since we turned down the last contract, this is essentially a new one, right? For a 1-year, do we need a reconsideration motion and go through all of that, or can we just?
It is a different motion, but as it stands right now, the direction that the commission has given to staff is to send the audit services out to bid for this year.
Got it.
So this action is contrary to that direction. So I think reconsideration would be necessary.
Fair enough. That point's very valid. Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the table. Any discussion?
Not me, Mike.
Commissioner Macy, sorry. My screen.
This is just a point of order, I guess. Doesn't someone who voted against it have to bring the motion for reconsideration, not the person who voted for it? So you can continue to bring your own motions up repeatedly, even with the same vote? That seems unlikely.
Is what it is.
Someone on the winning side.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, the motion needs to be brought by someone who was on the prevailing side.
Right.
The prior motion. So in this case, it would have to be someone that voted in favor of the rejection of the recommendation for the 5-year extension and in favor of the sending the services out to bid for this year.
So that was Commissioner Douglas.
Correct.
And Commissioner Dubuck. So regardless, both the maker and the seconder, person who seconded it, both were on the prevailing side to send it out to bid and reject the recommendation.
And all we really need is the person who brings the motion. So we are covered either way.
Okay, Commissioner Douglas, real quick, your motion was to reconsider and move forward with this recommendation, or just reconsider at this point?
Well, we need a motion to reconsider to bring it back onto the agenda to discuss auditor selection. So once this motion to reconsider is approved, assuming that it is, then there'll be room for another motion on the actual auditor selection.
Good. Okay. I want to make sure I was clear on that part.
Ooh, I got a thumbs up from Mr. Gillum.
All right, Commissioner Lavasser has his hand up to discuss the motion.
Commissioner Douglas just answered the question that I had.
Okay, perfect. So I'll call for the vote. I'll start with me. I vote yes. Commissioner Prush,
Yes.
Commissioner Macy,
Yes.
Commissioner Dubak,
Yes.
Commissioner Douglas,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbs, Commissioner Gibbs, Commissioner Gibbs. Can you unmute Commissioner Gibbs? I think you're still muted. Try the top right corner of your screen where it says.
No, my screen is at the bottom left and it was on full screen, so no. Yes, I vote yes.
Okay. Commissioner Lavasser.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is back on the table right now, or it's been reconsidered. Okay, so those actions are undone at this point, and it's as if it's back on the table as is. So now, Mr. Gillum, I suppose someone could make a motion to say, hey, we'll just approve a 1-year extension at $59,000, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a proposed motion that's included in the memo dated May 26th.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Douglas.
Yes, I move approval of a 1-year extension on the Raymond contract as proposed in their the previous document from the Finance Department.
Okay, and we have second by Commissioner Perush. Discussion. Commissioner Lavasser.
Yeah, I've made it very clear how I like contracts to go up for bid from time to time. I do recognize that there are some extenuating circumstances here. So I'm going to support the approval of this contract on a 1-year basis with the expectation that we're going to put this out for bid next year.
So any other discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. I vote yes. Commissioner Perush.
Yes.
Commissioner Macy.
Yes.
Commissioner Dubak.
Yes.
Commissioner Douglas.
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbs.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavasser.
Yes.
Okay. Unanimous. 1-year extension at $59,000. Okay. We are now at the bottom of our agenda where we have other business. Is there any other business? No business. Quiet day in the neighborhood, huh? All right. Then I guess we move to item number 8. We can entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Commissioner Perush. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Dubak. Discussion? All right, with that, I'll call for the vote. Commissioner Lavasser?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbs? Commissioner Gibbs?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Douglas?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubak?
Yes.
Commissioner Macy?
Yes.
Commissioner Perush?
Yes.
And I vote yes. I think I got everyone. My screen moved around. So we're adjourned. Appreciate everybody and their contributions. I want to give a call out to staff. Nice job. You guys stepped up and apparently interpreted 7 different instructions from 7 different people and put them into something that was comprehensible and you know, we're moving closer to a budget for next year. So good job. I don't know how you do it. You're magic workers.
Good work, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys, stay safe. Enjoy the evening, what's left of it, and we'll see you guys all soon.
Not at all. Thank you.